You think $2 million dollars is enough to retire at 45? Let's actually test it using real spending data, portfolio math, and social security models to see if your money can last 45 years without a paycheck. We'll run two scenarios. So retire at 45, take social security at 62, and then retire at 45, take social security at 70. Because if you guess wrong, you could run out of money in your 70s when going back to work really isn't an option. You'll see the minimum amount you need to make it work, and more importantly, how the plan behind the portfolio is what truly makes or breaks early retirement. The numbers might surprise you, so let's get into it. Let's start by busting a common myth. People don't spend more as they age. They actually spend less. According to government data, people age 45 to 54 spend about $97,319 a year. And then each spending phase goes down to where at 75, you're spending $53,031 a year. That trend is baked into both of our models here and will also assume a 4% average investment return. Why so low, you ask? Because in early retirement, you'll likely keep more in cash to fund lifestyle expenses and reduce volatility. For Social Security, we're assuming a married couple where each spouse gets about $1,700 per month at full retirement age. Here's how that changes based on when you claim. So at 62, you'd get $28,800 per year, or about $2,400 a month. At 70 years old, you'd get $50,400 per year, or $4,200 a month. The catch here is if you retire at 45, you've got a big gap between retirement and when that income kicks in. That's called your Social Security bridge, and your portfolio needs to fund it fully. So we'll break retirement into phases based on age and when you claim Social Security. For each phase, we'll calculate how much you'd need today to fund it down to zero. And once we've totaled it all up, we'll add a 15% buffer to cover things like market volatility, sequence of returns risk, lifestyle shifts, and healthcare shocks. This is how we'll plan for some flexibility or really just emotional margin. Let's see how that plays out. Let's start with our baseline. So you retire at 45 and take Social Security at 62. That means your portfolio needs to do all the work for 17 years straight. BLS data shows that from age 45 to 54, average spending per year is $97,319. So over this 10-year span, that's a total spend of $973,000. The next band goes from 55 to 64, of which we'll see 7 years in this phase. So spending $83,000 a year for a total of $583,000. Over those 17 years, that's a total spend of $1.5 million in today's dollars. Using our return rate of 4%, that means you'd need about $1.1 million today. So then moving on to phase two, you claim Social Security at 62 for a benefit of $28,800 a year, or $2,400 a month. This phase is only 3 years because it finishes out that BLS spending band at $83K a year. Combining that with your guaranteed income, you've got a gap of $54K a year that you need to cover. So at our return rate of 4%, you'd need $77,000 today. In our next phase, from age 65 to 74, Medicare kicks in and spending drops to $64,000 a year. Net of Social Security, that's a gap of $35K a year. At our return rate of 4%, you'd need $130K today. Finally, phase 4 begins from age 75 to 90. These are slower lifestyle years, so the spending drops again to $53K a year. Netting that out with Social Security leaves a gap of $24,000 per year. So at our return rate of 4%, you'd need about $87,000 today. All right, let's add it up. So total cash need today across all phases is $1.4 million. When you add in our 15% buffer for market risk, healthcare, and margin of safety, we need a total of about $1.6 million today to retire at 45 years old. What happens if you delay Social Security until age 70 instead? Let's test that next. This version asks more of your portfolio, but it rewards you with higher guaranteed income down the road. In scenario 1, you needed to fund 17 years before Social Security kicked in. In this scenario, it's 25 years. So for simplicity in this scenario, we expanded phase 1 to cover the entire 25 years of full drawdown. No Social Security and no Medicare. Spending tiers across this phase are from age 45 to 54, $97,000 a year. Age 55 to 64, $83K a year. And then 65 to 69 is $64K a year. So when you add all those up, total spending is about $2.1 million. And with our 4% return, you'd need about $1.3 million today. Moving to phase 2, from age 70 to 74, you start receiving the increased Social Security of $50,400 a year. Spending stays at $64K per year, so your portfolio only needs to cover a gap of $13,000 per year for 5 years. So at our 4% return, you'd need about $22.9K. Then finally, phase 3 finishes out your retirement from age 75 to 90. Spending declines again to $53,000 a year. Social Security continues at $50K a year. So your portfolio only needs to fill a $2,631 gap for 16 years, which at our 4% return, you'd need about $9,500 today. So the final total for scenario 2 is $1.4 million. When you add our 15% buffer for flexibility and risk, the final target is $1.62 million today to retire at 45. This is remarkably similar to scenario 1. So what's the trade-off? Delaying Social Security to age 70 saves you only $16,000 in today's dollars. That's less than 1.2% of the total nest egg. Even though Social Security increases by over $21,000 a year, the benefit is backloaded. And because we're discounting all future dollars to today, money received 25 plus years from now doesn't move the needle much. This highlights why modeling your actual retirement cash flow matters more than chasing the highest monthly check. It's not always about claiming later, but claiming smarter. Let's be honest, you might have been thinking this during the last few segments. This looks a little too clean, and you're absolutely right. This model is powerful, but it's also a straight line. And life doesn't work that way. It zigs and zags, and sometimes it just sucker punches you at the worst possible moment. So let's look at what this model doesn't show and why that matters. This plan assumes a steady 4% return every year. But markets don't work like that, especially when you need the money the most. If you hit a downturn early in retirement, like 2008 or 2020, it's not just painful, it can be catastrophic. And that's called sequence of returns risk, and it can permanently reduce how long your money lasts. If we ran volatility simulations or Monte Carlo analysis, like I do in real client plans, you might need 10 or 25% more saved at 45 just to have a high probability of success. The 15% buffer we added helps, but if you get unlucky in year 2 or year 3, the buffer evaporates real fast. It's easy to focus on market crashes, but inflation is slower, sneakier, and just as dangerous. The BLS numbers we used are in today's dollars. But if inflation averages even 2.5%, the 83K budget at 55 needs to be closer to 125K by the time you're 75. Some of this can be offset by assuming a higher portfolio return, say 7%, minus 3% inflation gives us that 4% real return. But in this model, we didn't inflate spending, which means we're underestimating how much your lifestyle will cost decades from now. So a rule of thumb, if you want to model in real dollars, everything, spending and returns, must be inflation adjusted. Even with Medicare, retirees still spend an average of $300,000 out of pocket on healthcare over retirement. And if long-term care also becomes part of your story, that can mean $80 to $120K a year for assisted living, sometimes for multiple years. Yeah, we built in a 15% buffer, but we didn't model health shocks, long-term care, or major medical events. If you want true peace of mind, that needs to be part of the picture. This model also assumes that you spend the entire portfolio down to zero at age 90. That's one approach, and for some, it does make sense. For most retirees I work with, that's absolutely terrifying. Behavioral studies show that people consistently underspend in retirement because they fear running out of money. Plus, many people have legacy goals, like helping their kids, supporting charities, or just knowing there's a safety cushion if something goes wrong. If you want to leave anything behind, or even just sleep better at night, you'd likely want to maintain a floor, maybe $250K or more by age 90. That changes the starting point and the required portfolio. What do you do with this? The model gives you a strong baseline, like a how close am I kind of answer. But the next step is personalizing it. What are your spending needs and your comfort with risk? Are there legacy goals or unknowns that you want to plan for? What happens if life doesn't go according to plan? That's where real financial planning comes in. Now, let's zoom out, because while these scenarios are helpful, the most important variable is still you. Not everyone spends like the BLS average. Some people are thrilled living on $3,000 a month in a paid-off home, while others want to travel, upgrade the kitchen, or take the grandkids to Disney twice a year. Now, housing is the number one factor. It makes up 30 to 35% of most retirement budgets. If you own your home free and clear, you just lowered your burn rate dramatically. Healthcare is number two. Even with Medicare, you can expect 10 to 15% of your annual budget here. And don't forget about dental, vision, and long-term care, because they're not included in the standard Medicare. Then there's transportation and travel. Do you want to use Toyota and quiet weekends, or do you want to buy that RV and hit the national parks? You can't ignore geography either. Like, someone retiring in the Midwest will have a very different cost of living than someone in New York City or the Bay Area. Finally, consider some part-time income. Even 10 to 15K a year from consulting, teaching, or passion projects can slow down portfolio drawdowns, delay that Social Security, or just give you peace of mind. So yes, the math matters, but your retirement should reflect your life, your values, and what freedom looks like to you. Because otherwise, what's the point? So what's the minimum to retire early at 45? In both scenarios, we landed around $1.6 million, assuming average spending, average luck, and no legacy goals. Knowing your number, even a rough one, gives you power. Even more important than retiring early, though, is retiring confidently. If you want to model your own numbers, I've linked a free tool below from the same software I use for client planning. You can run your own projections anytime. Or if you want help pressure testing your plan, I offer free one-on-one consults. Info is linked below. And hey, if this video helped you think differently about retirement, I'd love it if you gave it a like or subscribed. That tells me to make more videos like this. So if you have questions or found something else I missed in these scenarios, drop them in the comments. As always, thanks for watching.